One of the defining qualities of the scientific process is a deep commitment to objectivity. What that means is when a scientist designs an experiment to test a whole suite of hypotheses, of possible explanations to explain the phenomenon or the problem, they don't have some preferred outcome in mind, a pet hypothesis that they want to be supported by the data. So it can be really tricky to discern what is actual science because oftentimes very powerful industries will invest heavily in creating pseudoscience or false science, materials that appear scientific on their surface but are inherently biased. They're corrupted by the almighty dollar. The classic example of this type of bias is the tobacco industry. So, uh, Marlboro and Phillips Morris, they knew for decades that their product caused cancer, that smoking tobacco was associated with much higher probabilities of developing lung and throat and mouth cancers. And yet, they purposefully created doubt about the growing body of scientific evidence linking smoking to lung cancer. So here's a great example of an advertisement where more scientists and educators choose to smoke Kent because of those micro filters, which filters are not making the product safer. So if you smoke, now is a great time to quit so that you can live a long and healthy life. An even more depressing example comes from one of the world's largest oil companies, ExxonMobil, whose scientists, in-house scientists, created uncannily accurate climate models linking human-generated greenhouse gases to our warming planet way back in 1977. I was 1 year old when those scientists produced those models. And yet, even given the overwhelming evidence that the climate is rapidly changing because of human activities, ExxonMobil collaborated with the Heritage Foundation in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s to publicly cast doubt on the science. They buried their own in-house science and promoted the idea that we just didn't know enough about it. They deliberately sowed uncertainty, even though one of their in-house models was 99% accurate in predicting future warming. And we still see the cultural impacts of that misinformation campaign today. Even though the vast majority of the scientific community recognize the existential threat caused by man-made climate change, a huge proportion of our population is still under the influence of a biased propaganda campaign broadcast by an oil company to preserve their own self-interest, even though their own scientists knew better. So why is this bias a problem? Look at the rising number of billion-dollar extreme weather disasters in the United States during that same time period, from 1980 up until 2024. These are droughts and wildfires and hurricanes. You can see 2023 was a record year. It's now December 2024, and 2024 is even going to surpass 2023. The Carolinas were decimated by a massive hurricane, back-to-back hurricanes that hit Florida just a few months ago. So what you're looking at here, is the cost that all of us American citizens are going to have to bear for doing nothing about attempting to curb climate change. So shareholders of these large international companies continue to make record profits at the expense of the general public. Science must remain committed to objective research that makes an honest attempt to recognize our own biases and avoid those in our experimental design.